Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
What's up, super friends? Welcome to this week's show. You know, meditation has come up a lot in past episodes, and it seems that a lot of the world's top performers are using meditation to find emotional clarity, to find mental performance, or just generally to improve their mind's health. For this reason, I'm so excited to welcome my guest today. He's becoming one of the foremost experts on meditation, and he spent 11 years helping over 1.5 million people start or improve their meditation practice. He's an incredibly interesting guy. I mean, he spent 6 years in a Tibetan Buddhist monastery and was ordained as a Buddhist monk. But he had so much to share with us about meditation and its benefits and how to integrate it into your daily life that we didn't even get a chance to talk about what life on a monastery was like. This episode is brought to you by Biome. Did you know that your body is covered in trillions of bacteria? Biome lets you learn about your inner world, how you compare to others, and to yourself over time. Go gluten-free and see how your microbiome changes. Is your probiotic working? Check them out at ubiome.com. I know you're going to take away a ton from this episode, so I'm really excited to introduce you guys to Mr. Chad Foreman. Good morning, Chad. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jonathan. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're very, very happy to have you. So, Chad, I'm very, very curious. The first thing I wanted to ask you, because it's always something I wonder when I see someone who's spent time in a monastery or a monk or kind of really devoted their lives to this practice, what motivates you to devote your entire life to meditation? Could you maybe share a little bit of your story with us and what happened in your life that made you say, hey, I want to go join a convent. I want to spend hours a day meditating?
Sure. I guess it was a long process. I was an athlete. I was a tennis player growing up, trying to break through the professional circuit. And it was through that training that I became familiar with mental training, sports psychology, controlling your mind for the best result on the court, and that sort of thing. And I came across Tibetan Buddhism while I was coaching. I'd retired from my career, if you can call it that, and I was coaching. And I was helping other people with that as well. But it was coming across Tibetan Buddhism where they're all about mind training, training your mind to be calmer, clearer, happier. I really took to that on the level of training skills. It seemed to me, and also I guess where happiness came from. The short answer to this is I wanted to be happy and pursue my highest happiness. And I came across the idea through Buddhism that happiness comes from the mind, and not so much from your possessions or anything else. And that intrigued me. And it seemed that you could train your mind to be happier through meditation and mindfulness and mind control. And as I said, from an athletic perspective, I thought I can do this. I can train my forehand to get better. I can train my muscles to get stronger. Why shouldn't I be able to train my mind to get happier?
Mm-hmm. Is happiness something that you struggled with previously?
I was just an average guy. I guess I come from a middle-class family. I was pretty well off here in Australia. So no, I never really sunk down into depression or anything in my early days. I think anger was something I struggled with on and off the court, a short temper and getting frustrated and things like that. And that's what attracted me again to the Buddhist side of things, where they sort of have promises where you can reduce your anger and to be happier. So it was more trying to excel at happiness and get the highest happiness, rather than, being miserable and trying to come out of that.
So that's a major, major benefit to meditation. But for those who maybe haven't been exposed or are kind of new to the idea, could you walk us through some of the basic principles and maybe dispel some of the misconceptions about meditation?
Sure. Well, firstly, there's many different types of meditation. I come from training in the Buddhist background. I think there's two general categories of meditation, and that is a relative level of meditation where you train skills and develop your mind. And that's more skill-based training where you can improve, get better at it. And then there's another side of meditation which is more to do with identity and self-awareness of your actual nature, self-inquiry, and those sort of meditations for that. So that there's two types of meditations that mainly taught in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition and in the Buddhist traditions is mindfulness, or what's called calm abiding, and special insight. I guess for beginners, the best way to start is with concentration. And there's different things you can put your attention on. The classical one is the breath. I think the breath is a very skillful use in meditation. It's a very skillful way to meditate is watching the breath. And the reason being that the breath is something that you can both control and allow to breathe naturally, allow your breath to breathe itself. So there's a certain mechanism in letting go of control when you watch your breath to watch it do its thing. That's an important facet in the beginning stages of meditation. But you can use a candle, a visual object just to stare at to increase your concentration. Some people use mantra, repeating a phrase over and over again in their head, or simply awareness of the bodily sensations as well is another type of mindfulness. All these practices improve your concentration, which improves your clarity. Another huge benefit of that is it improves your ability to drop your last thought and not get into your thoughts and head too much. So the skill of being able to drop your thought and come to what you want to put your attention on is a very important skill at the beginning as well. So for people just getting into meditation, sitting down for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, sitting still, watching your breath, and trying not to be distracted. Meditation is one of those things that's easily said, but more difficult to do. So it sounds like an easy thing to do, just to sit still for 10 or 15 minutes and watch your breath. But once you sit down and try to do that, you realize how agitated your mind is, how it refuses to sit still or stay on the one topic, or stay on what you're trying to concentrate on.
Absolutely. It can be incredibly frustrating. I mean, I'm a relative beginner to meditation, but it's been remarkable to me just how far I am from where I would want to be. The question that I always ask myself is, a large part of meditation, as I understand it, is about acceptance and calm. So is the idea of becoming better or improving or making progress a silly one when it comes to meditation? Should you have goals when it comes to meditation?
This is a key question. Yeah, I think it's a key question what you're asking here. And there's different schools of thought on this one. There's the non-dual perspective, which says it's more about that second type of meditation of discovering what's already there. It's called the direct path. And it comes from just looking within, turning your mind and attention around and seeing what's there. So in that sense, you're not developing anything, you're more finding something. And the great masters and people who meditated for a while, that they can find this thing that's always there. And for want of a better term, it's simply known as awareness. And this awareness is already peaceful, it's already accepting, and it's already open. So it's a matter of contacting that. So you can get better at contacting it, I think. So you can improve yourself by being able to come from that place and find that place. So that's the highest type of meditation, and what I think is what enlightenment is discovering who you really are, discovering the core of your being. But in saying that, the beginning of meditation, as I mentioned, was concentration or maybe mindfulness. And that is something that you can develop. You can get better at. Your mind can be honed and tuned into concentrating better, into not being distracted, being able to stay on the one object. And the manuals are very much an improvement thing. You start with just being able to stay on your object for a few minutes. Actually only a few seconds, the manuals say, and then you develop that. So eventually you can stay on the object of your meditation, like your breath or your mantra, without being overly distracted for up to an hour or even 2 hours. And that comes with some special sort of results as well. So I think there's two levels to meditation. One is very much can develop yourself, improve yourself, develop skills, improve skills. And then there's another level where it's more just discovering who you are already. So the language of improving when it comes to talking about discovering who you are already can be problematic. It's a huge field.
It almost sounds as though either way there is an element of improving, but if it's a matter of discovering who you are, it's kind of clearing off the layer of dust that's preventing your true self and that calm inner core from coming out.
Yes. And this is a paradox. You're not actually achieving anything. You're more removing things. There's some popular quotes on Facebook, whether or not Buddha said it or not, but that he didn't achieve anything from enlightenment. He merely got rid of his anxiety, his anger and depression and so forth. So those things were stripped away, and what was underneath them was this immaculate, luminous nature. So yeah, the process of meditation could be viewed as a purifying one, or that classic example of dusting off the mirror that you just said.
So I'm very curious because I've listened to a lot of work by Sam Harris, who advocates a detachment of meditation as a wonderful practice for secular people or people who have no connection to Hinduism or Buddhism. Obviously, you've spent a great deal of time in the Buddhist faith. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on, is meditation for everyone, and is it as effective if you approach it from a secular perspective without a lot of the ideologies that come along with it?
Good question. You asked me before about dispelling the myth. So I think it is a myth that it is a religious practice. For me, fundamentally, meditation is driving you sane, is the way I like to put it. We know the idea of getting driven insane. Meditation drives you sane. And it's this sanity of having a clear mind or be able to look at things clearly, openly, and without prejudice or preconceived ideas, which is what I'm calling sane. And without meditation, often we get so fused in our thoughts that we don't see things clearly. We see things how we want to see them due to our past conditioning, the filters that we have between us and what's happening. And in that sense, we can go quite insane and be really stuck to our opinions and our beliefs and live sort of by a story we have in our head rather than the sanity of the present moment. So I don't think meditation, even though it's found in religion, and it's been cultivated in religion, it's not a religious practice. I think it's much more suitable to be called a psychological practice, mental health practice, or even spiritual health sort of practice. I think it's a misconception to think that you have to be religious. In fact, it's my kind of aim to remove it from that context and bring it into a secular context where anyone can practice it for whatever reason, wherever they find themselves. Now, in saying that, Jonathan, I think it's quite important to have a meditative view, or a different view of the world, a different paradigm. And this is where non-dual teachings and spiritual teachings come into a little bit more. If you're meditating and you think that you're a material sort of being and separate from everything else, and meditation simply just improves your brain cells and things like that, I don't think coming from that view and practicing meditation, you will get the results compared to taking the view that the core of your being, your fundamental core, is consciousness. And it's a bit of a paradigm shift in the West, in the sense that in the West, physics says that there's the brain, and from the brain comes consciousness. It's a bit of a flip on that idea. And in the Eastern traditions, it's sort of the other way around, that consciousness is primary, and from that comes the brain and the body and everything else physical. So I think to look into things a little bit more and to look into your beliefs and how you think the world is can really benefit your meditation, taking it to all the way. Of course, if you've got no interest in taking it all the way and you just want to improve your concentration and your productivity and handle your emotions better, there's no problems with adopting just a normal sort of materialist view of the world. But to really go all the way, I think you have to question your view deeply, and that's your view is a very important part of what meditation practice is.
So, Chad, we've covered a lot of the benefits, and I think at this point it's probably pretty clear to most people that it's very worthwhile to go into meditation and at least give it a try. On the other hand, as someone personally who spends a lot of time weightlifting, I know a lot of our audience spends a lot of time sitting. Flexibility can be really lousy, and being physically comfortable can be very difficult, especially in the cross-legged position. So I'm curious what the effect of different postures are. How important is your seating position? And essentially, is leaning against the wall detracting from your experience? Is sitting in a chair detracting from your experience?
I think it is important, your meditation posture. If you can sit up straight and sit cross-legged, I'm a bit of a traditionalist like that. I think there is something to it. In Zen meditation, there's not a lot of instructions given once you're in that sitting position. It is just adopting that sitting position. But in saying that, everyone's different. If you're a weightlifter like you mentioned and you're a bit stiffer, or you're a little bit older, or you have inflexible hips, or whatever it may be, you shouldn't torture yourself into a position. It's probably a misconception that you need to sit cross-legged to meditate. I think there's other factors way more important than the sitting posture. And one of them I think that people forget about is the sitting still. The sitting still, I think, is a very important factor in meditation. Having a balanced, comfortable posture is important, and that's comfortable and balanced. So however you can get into a comfortable position, you can use a stool. There's kneeling stools, which make it easier. I think you can sit on a chair without using the back on the edge of the chair. All these postures don't detract from meditation at all. I think if you can sit up straight and sit still, these are the key factors.
Do you have some kinds of recommendations? I know there are different kinds of mats, different types and brands of stools. Is there anything that you recommend, particularly for Westerners who spend a lot of time sitting in chairs as opposed to squatting or kneeling?
Yeah, the stool is a great one. The Zen cushions are called Zafus, just those round cushions. They're great to sit on. I think when you're getting your posture right, you have to have the cushion just angled forward a little bit. That really helps. So not so much sit on top of the cushion, but get a nice angle at the front so you get your hips in a good position. There's lots of things like that you can use, but for Westerners, when I take my guided meditation classes, people sit in chairs. I'm very happy for people to sit in chairs. On the edge of the chair, like I say, so you're just sitting up straight. But also setting up a place in your house where it's like a sacred little meditation place purposely for that. I think that can help you with discipline and a regular routine as well, to have a special place and therefore like have a little special cushion and a special mat.
Absolutely. I'm looking at mine right now. I have a few rolled up towels, a yoga mat under it, and in front I have these great 3M noise blocking kind of earmuffs. They're actually for construction work. But let me tell you, if you're a beginner to meditation, the slightest sound can throw you off. So I put these things on and the only thing I can hear is my heartbeat, which is really super helpful for me, at least.
That's perfect. I mean, back in the day, the monks didn't have $120 cushions, to sit on. Whatever you can do to raise your hips up a bit and sit down, that's good enough.
Absolutely. Yeah, Chad, I'd also be interested to hear your thoughts about substances and meditation, and I'll explain why. In the past, we've had a neuroscientist on the show discussing nootropics or smart drugs. We discussed a little bit about ADHD medication, different substances and how they affect the brain, and he was also a big advocate of meditation. On the other hand, I know a lot of monks use tea to keep the mind alert, and in fact, I think both cappuccino, coffee, and beer were invented by monks to use during meditation. At the same time, I know a lot of practitioners of meditation and a lot of different faiths believe that consumption of any stimulant or any alcohol clouds the mind. So it's a long-winded way to ask, what are the interactions between substances and medication? Are some of them advantageous to use during meditation?
So you're talking about like psychedelics as well and things like that?
Well, actually, I more thought in terms of tea, coffee, if you're taking nootropics or prescription medicine for attention deficit, and also alcohol. But I would also love to go into psychedelics as a way to explore meditative states, if you'd like to go into that.
Yeah, I mean, the classic texts will say not to take any substances. I know you mentioned the monks having tea. I've even heard things that the incense they used in some of the monasteries were based on cannabis, rolled up cannabis herbs in their incense, which would aid in their chanting and things like that. It depends what you're trying to do with your meditation. I think in a way drugs can cloud the mind, and alcohol and those things can cloud the mind in the sense it covers up what's naturally pure and clear in your mind. You're sort of throwing more dust on the mirror in a way. So mostly I'd say it's not beneficial to be taking those things. If it's daily medication and you can't do anything about it, well, of course, still meditate to the best of your ability, and you might have your own obstacles and personal issues with that, and you sort of have to work through it. When it comes to psychedelics, I think these things can give you glimpses into other states of consciousness, which are very similar to mystic states that meditators and yogis have experienced. The reports from both people who have taken psychedelics and people who have meditated, are very, very similar. So I think there's something in that. And there's research coming out more and more on these sorts of things, getting into it. And I think it's a controversial area, but something that I hope a lot more research is done in it.
Absolutely. Have you listened to or read Sam Harris's post called Drugs and the Meaning of Life?
No, I haven't.
Well, I'll summarize it and I'll put a link to it in our show notes. But basically, it's kind of a very provocative article where he explains, there are different substances and I have 2 daughters. And if they experiment with this one, I'll be devastated. And if they don't experiment with certain other ones, such as enjoying a beer with friends or experiencing psychedelics, he says he would feel that they'd missed out on a life experience. And the reason he says that is with years of meditation, you are highly likely to experience a separation of the mind and body. He says with psychedelics, you are guaranteed to experience it. So it's kind of a fast track to understanding a lot of things that can be understood or should be understood through meditation. What are your thoughts on that?
I think these subjects, like I was saying, should be discussed and shouldn't be taboo. I think some of the great scientific discoveries in the West have probably come from people being intoxicated in some way. It does give you great insight into your mind and consciousness. I think one guy, I forget who said it, a scientist, is until we're free to experiment with our own consciousness, we're not really free at all. So it's our minds, it's our consciousness, and it's still quite a mystery what's going on in there. So I don't think we should be as narrow-minded as to place certain drugs in the taboo range and then say others are okay, like pharmaceuticals. I think we should just open it up and listen to the people who have done the research and had these experiences. In saying that, I like what Alan Watts says about it too. Once you get the message, hang up the phone. I think that's good advice as well. I think there's danger in becoming addicted to these drugs and the experiences they bring. They're not sustainable. Any drug user will tell you that the experiences get diminished over time and you just can't keep producing these chemically induced experiences through your life. So in that sense, I don't think they're sustainable. They're good to get a glimpse of perhaps another reality, to break through your conditioned beliefs in what you think reality is. So it can really shake up your whole worldview and look at things differently and encourage you to explore your consciousness more. But I think there's a danger in taking too much of it and relying on it. Some teachers say too, getting back to like purifying the mind, the meditation isn't a state of consciousness. It's more of a no state. We get a bit paradoxical here, but it's not a conditioned state of mind that you create through either mental gymnastics of meditation or through psychedelics or drugs. These states are temporary, impermanent, and they come and go. What you're looking for in meditation is to find something a lot more fundamental that's there all the time, that can be relied upon. In that sense, I don't think drugs can be relied upon as much as self-discovery and finding this fundamental core of your being within yourself. It's there all the time. It doesn't need to be induced by meditation or drugs. It's something you can find even in this moment right now.
It's funny you say that because I had an opportunity while I was in India to meditate actually with someone who was quote unquote enlightened and certainly seemed very enlightened. And that was the exact piece of advice he gave me when he saw me fidgeting around and having discomfort was even when you're experiencing this discomfort, there is this calm core within you. And meditation is just a practice of finding that through whatever means, whether it be the breath or a candle or...
Yes. A lot of the concentration stuff, like we said, is just clearing it away so you can see what's there. So you can look within and see exactly what's there. It also helps you see the world clearer as well, so you can look with honesty into the world and be better adjusted to it, more sensitive, so to speak. But yeah, I agree with that it's the core of your being is here right now, and discovery can be made in every moment.
Absolutely. In fact, I recently saw a video, which was admittedly a little bit sensationalist, about the brain's pineal gland and how it's important for us as a sort of spiritual antenna. And it went on to talk about how modern diet and fluoride in our water and so on calcifies the pineal gland. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. And is that a real thing? Is it something we think about with meditation as improving the health of that pineal gland?
I think it's problematic to pinpoint out organs and things which are meant to be antennas or conduits or something of consciousness. It reminds me of Lobsang Rabjang. It was a famous book about enlightenment, I think in the 70s or 80s, and you got to your third eye by pretty much lobotomizing yourself. They literally chisel out your third eye and tap you in the forehead there, and that would open it up, sort of thing. I'm just a little bit skeptical about describing states of consciousness so physically. And finding them in your pineal gland. In spiritual practices, the heart is talked about a lot, having an open heart, having a warm heart, having a kind heart. They're not actually talking about the throbbing organ, that pumps blood throughout your body. They're talking about something more to do with consciousness. Now, in saying that, the same with psychedelic drugs and chemicals and serotonin and how these chemicals affect us, I think that's all still a bit mysterious. Terence McKenna is probably the best one to read on that sort of thing, I reckon. But he just talks about the magic of chemicals and how they're gateways into other dimensions and alternate realities, and the pineal gland being like a stargate into other dimensions. I really am not sure about all that. Like I said, I'm skeptical, but I'm open to it. It certainly hasn't helped me one way or the other, believing or not believing in the pineal gland when it comes to my meditation. It's not the sort of thing that I need to know or develop or anything else.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's exciting. I think the more research, again, these things should be discussed openly and researched.
Absolutely. And I think especially in Western society, we've become kind of a little bit spiritually bankrupt or spiritually malnourished is what someone once said to me. And I think meditation is one avenue among many. I mean, charitable giving, volunteering, things like that. They're really ways to just explore the sense of spirituality and feel enriched by it.
Yeah, we're very fragmented in our bureaucratic, rational sort of modern world, and often very alienated, even in big cities. We're surrounded by millions of people. And meditation, this core that we're talking about, I think is a sense of wholeness and completeness that has no boundaries. So it very much counteracts the idea of alienation and fragmentation and helps you to bring all of yourself into a wholeness, into a being without boundaries and so forth. So yeah, I think really meditation is a great tool to help with that spiritual malaise of our times.
Absolutely. This episode is brought to you by Biome. Did you know that your body is covered in trillions of bacteria? Microbes outnumber human cells 10 to 1. Learn about how your microbiome is influenced by your diet, exercise, lifestyle, and health factors, and see how it changes over time. Biome lets you learn about your inner world, how you compare to others and to yourself over time. Go gluten-free and see how your microbiome changes. Is your probiotic working? Test for yourself in the largest research study of the microbiome in history. You simply use their sample kit, which contains everything you need to swab your microbiome. Check them out at ubiome.com/superhuman and enter the coupon code superhuman2015 at checkout to receive 10% off of your order. Chad, I'm curious. I once heard someone who was very experienced in meditating say that the first year or so he wasted because he thought he was meditating and in fact he was sitting and thinking. So what I would find valuable, and probably our audience would find valuable, is how do we know what should we start to feel as we begin, I guess, improving or as we begin meditating more consistently? How does one know that they're on the right track, that should they be thinking about that? And if so, how do we know? What should we experience that says, look, you're productively meditating, you're getting the full benefit out of this experience?
Yeah, I think there should be signs and there should be benefit. I know what that guy means when he means wasting your time because you're thinking that there is a big difference between sitting still for 10 minutes and daydreaming and sitting still for 10 minutes and meditating. Mm-hmm. So you have to make the distinction. I think the major thing you're dealing with in meditation is your thoughts. I think there's a common misconception that to meditate or to find peace, you have to stop your thoughts and have no thoughts. And that's where peace comes into it. But I think that's a misconception and it's very difficult. Thoughts will always be there. It's just a new relationship you have with thoughts. But I think it's vitally important to know the distinction between being caught up in your thoughts. The word they use in mindfulness therapy is fused. You sort of become just one with your thoughts. You can't find any separation. Know the difference between that feeling and the feeling of being separate from them and being able to watch them as a witness and having some detachment from them. So I think that's a very important skill to know whether you're meditating or not, is whether you're caught up in your thoughts and completely going off with them or whether you're detached from them. And that detachment brings peace. It really does. When you're not caught up in your thoughts or your dramas, and particularly not taking your thoughts seriously, you're not believing your thoughts. They just become ephemeral, passing and transient. You don't really pay them much attention. That itself brings a sense of peace and calm and non-agitation, ability to have clarity, a focused mind. I think also with meditation, you become kinder and less reactive because you're not so caught up in your thoughts, you're not controlled by them. You create a bit of space between you and your reactions. So you can sort of just have a bit of distance from your thoughts and what's going on and perhaps make a wiser decision about the best way to act or in that present moment. So I think these are the sort of things that you should look out for, but particularly in relation to your thoughts, how is that going in your meditation? And that way you become your own guide. You become your own meditation teacher. You know when you've been watching your breath and you've been fairly concentrative, and you should know when you've been distracted and going off. That's one of the main skills that you need to develop,
So as I understand it, when someone as experienced as yourself meditates, you're having thoughts, but those thoughts are primarily just about the sensation of your breath or the candle. There aren't emails jumping in. There aren't thoughts about what someone said to you jumping in every, 5 seconds like a beginner would experience. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. I have the craziest thoughts. I think about the past, what people said. It's the same as everybody else. I think that's another misconception, that people who meditate for a while don't have all these random thoughts. It's what our brain or our mind does. It's thinking, it's planning, it's judging, it's problem solving, and it's 24/7. And saying that, I have quieter days than other days, but if I'm having a big week, a lot on my plate, my mind's as frantic as anyone else's.
I see.
It's being able to find that space and not take them seriously. It becomes just like a radio in the other room you're not really paying attention to. You know there's sound there and there's stuff going on, but it's of no interest to you.
I see.
Yeah, so you create space by knowing that the thoughts aren't the only thing happening in your mind. There's just so much room and other things going on that are more primary, more fundamental, bigger. So sky-like mind is the way the masters describe it sometimes. So you rest in the sky and your thoughts just become the weather passing by, the clouds sort of going through the sky, but the main thing you're identified is with the sky. And it's a good way to be able to find that space when there are thoughts there. And that way during the day, when you're not sitting down calmly and sitting still, you're able to find that space behind the thoughts all the time. So there's no reason to try to get rid of your thoughts or stop them altogether. From what I understand, that's near impossible. They do slow down the calmer you get, which can be nice. But yeah, they're always going to be there, I think.
That's very interesting, because when I arrived to India, I met someone who was going to kind of be my guru for the week. And the first thing he said is, what do you want to take away from this experience? And I said, I'd like to work on having fewer thoughts. And he said, oh, well, I still have many thoughts. But what I understood was that the goal was to make those thoughts fewer and further in between and make them about the breath, or essentially be deliberate in your thoughts. I hadn't realized that you're still allowing them to come very freely.
Yeah, it's because resisting your thoughts creates this tension within you. So if you're trying to push your thoughts away, you'll never really relax. So to fully relax, one meditation teacher says, it's like leaving a wild horse. You leave it in a big paddock. You just give it lots of room to move around, and it will tire itself out. So thoughts are a bit like that. You just give them lots of space to run around and to think whatever. And by not giving them attention, they do slow down. I think at the initial stages too, you can have a really deep, enlightened meditation on your first try as well. I think it's another misconception that it might take years and years and years to get anywhere. It's not like that. It's not like playing the piano, where if I played for 20 years and you hadn't touched the piano, I would be better than you. But with meditation, we all have this core, this aware core. And sometimes I might have too much covering up and somebody else might glimpse it who's just a beginner. So there's no waiting years to find it. It's right there. That's important, to go straight to it within meditation and to find that core at the beginning stages. To get to it at the beginning, you can point out that it's between your thoughts, that thoughts aren't everything, that there is an ending point of one thought, and before the next thought starts, there's a tiny gap. And at the beginning, that gap is infinitesimal. It's very small, so it's difficult to find. But if you can calm down, that's what a lot of the breathing and relaxation stuff is. If you can calm down, your mind and your thoughts do slow down, and then you might notice that gap. You're like, wow, thinking is not all that happens. There is a gap, and I am still aware, and I am still alive, and I didn't die because I'm not thinking. And initially you find that gap and you experience it and you get a taste for it. But then you realize that what you find within that gap doesn't disappear when you're thinking. It's still there behind the thought. So again, at the beginning stages, it can be very helpful to reduce the thoughts by calming right down and relaxing and breathing deeply, and then finding that awareness behind the thoughts. But then once you've found that awareness, it's not as important to slow the thoughts down to find it, because you sort of recognize it more, you're familiar with it, and you can sort of taste it whenever you want.
And in some sense, you're still thinking because you're focusing on bodily awareness, you're focusing on your breath. It's just a different sort of thinking. It's observation and consciousness, if I understand correctly.
I wouldn't like to call it thinking. I think you need to make the distinction between bare awareness and thinking. There's a big difference between looking at your emotions or your sensations or what's going on in the room right now and thinking about it and seeing those things through your thoughts and judgments and preconceived ideas compared to just holding them in your awareness without thinking about them, judging them, comparing them, just being able to hold them in your bare awareness. And this is the key at the beginning, is to know the distinction between when you're aware and when you're thinking, I was talking about before. And it's this bare awareness which is the entry point into finding that peaceful core.
Chad, what are your thoughts on guided meditation versus solitary or some of the very popular meditation smartphone apps that are out right now?
I think guided meditation is important to begin with, to give you that taste, to have someone point out what you're trying to do. Coming from a sports background, I see it sort of as a bit of a coach, someone just to encourage you, point out what you're doing right and wrong, and just to guide you a little bit. But ultimately, I think you have to become your own meditation teacher. And from the outside, like looking at people meditating in front of me, I have no idea whether they're lost in their thoughts or whether they're just very present with their breath and their bodies. So you have to become your own meditation teacher. So I think for beginners, guided meditations are excellent. A way to experience meditation, get a taste of it, find out what everyone's on about, what am I actually trying to do here, just have that guidance. But eventually I think it's important to have your own practice, be your own teacher, and the discipline to sit down for 20 minutes a day, and also during the day try to bring awareness into your present moment. You can't have someone with you all the time telling you to watch your breath and let go of that thought and bring your mind home to the present moment.
Absolutely.
So I think, it's important at the beginning, I think really important, but eventually you need to be able to be your own teacher, your own guide, and take it from there, so to speak.
Are there any resources that stand out to you as particularly excellent, whether they're books, recorded meditations, apps?
Well, I'm a bit of a Buddhist geek, so I study a lot of the text myself. I don't read a lot of general stuff. I would say my page, my Facebook page, Meditation Masters, and my website, The Way of Meditation. I try to have resources there, instructions on how to practice mindfulness. I think the apps are great, modern technology getting involved. Yeah, I think all that can help remind people to meditate, help people to meditate. Like I said, at the beginning, you need as much help as you can get to get you on the path. And once you're walking on the path yourself, you can, take it from there.
That is certainly true. I started out with Headspace, and I found that the daily ritual of tuning in, watching a quick video clip explaining some concept, and then listening to this calming voice got me into the practice, and I was then able to wean myself off of it.
Yeah, I've heard about Headspace as well, good things about it. And this is bringing it into the mainstream as well and making it accessible for people and taking it out of a religious context as well, like we were talking about.
Sure.
I think these are all positive developments. But like anything, even we're talking about drugs, they become a crux and you become attached to them. And if you can't meditate without your app, you're not really progressing to a state of self-responsibility and self-awareness. So I think they're good for beginners and to get into the practice, and then eventually it's all you.
I love that. So one more question I really want to ask, I know you're very busy. If you could give a prescription to everyone, a generic prescription, and this number of 20 minutes has come up not only with you, but also with the neuroscientists we spoke with, what would be your step-by-step prescription for someone to start out, from time of day to length to which type of meditation you would recommend?
Okay, it's difficult to be prescriptive for everyone, that the one prescription suits everyone, just like a normal one. So I hesitate, and I would be flexible within what I told people. For instance, I love meditating at night. I'm not much of an early riser. People assume I am because I'm a meditation teacher, but no. So time of day, that classically they say either first thing in the morning or last thing at night. And to make it a regular time is important for discipline, and just that's the time of day that I sit down to meditate. So to be prescriptive, I would say to set a time, set a length of time. And for me, I prescribe combining both the mindfulness and the more presence or non-dual presence together. So sitting down into a meditative posture with a good alignment of your spine, sitting up straight and sitting still for that length of time. and concentrating on your breath and detaching from your thoughts. So these are simple instructions. All we've done is sat down, sit still, watch your breath, let the thoughts go as they bug you, as they come up. Just make an effort to drop them and come back to your breath. And then once you've calmed down a bit with that, I really think it's important to bring in a sense of being, or like I said, presence that you can find. And it's this sort of greater space that surrounds your entire meditation. And in this way, you're not trying to do anything or force yourself to achieve something like a goal. You get used to this other way of being, which is not a doing. It's more just being relaxed and simple in the present moment. So if that's not too convoluted, it's just sitting down, sitting still, setting a timer, watching your breath, letting go of thoughts, and trying to relax into this sense of being, which has to be experienced a bit. It's a little bit more difficult to explain, but some teachers call it contentment, not trying to achieve anything, just sitting with your breath. And it's just a very ordinary way of being, but we find out how restless we are and how much we strive and are not happy in the present moment when we try to achieve just this simple practice. So that would be my prescription. Those instructions are on my website as well.
Awesome.
Laid out in 6 points, to go into a bit more detail. So it's just, that would be my prescription. I think if everyone did that, it's offering peace to the world as well. When you meditate, it's not just for yourself, but you're becoming calmer and wiser, less reactive. So when you sit down to meditate, remember that you're doing it for everyone that's going to be in contact with you. And it's like a peace offering, I like to call it, to the world. You're disarming your own reactivity and anger and frustration and becoming a wiser, more peaceful person, which can do only help create a wiser and more peaceful world.
That's a very beautiful point to close on. Chad, if people do want to reach out to you, get in touch with you, book a private lesson, check out those great instructions and resources you mentioned, what website should we direct them to in the show notes?
My website is thewayofmeditation.com.au, and that's got all my instructions. It's got some of my guided meditations for my classes, and I am available for meditation mentoring. So that's all of the website, thewayofmeditation.com.au. And I'm on Facebook every day, popular page, Meditation Masters. We've got nearly 1.5 million followers. It's a great community online, and I post just inspirational reminders every day on mindfulness and meditation and inspiring philosophy. And that's Meditation Masters on Facebook. So you can find me there and ask questions and interact with other people on the page as well.
Excellent.
And if you're ever on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia, you can come to one of my classes.
Awesome. So Chad, thank you very, very much for your time today. I already feel calmer and I haven't even sat for my meditation. So I really appreciate it. And I know our audience does as well.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's a pleasure being here.
All right. Well, you have a great day.
Thanks, Jonathan. See you, mate.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.